Hello. My name is Vladimir T. Taran and I will tell you about the development of a technology for production of humic preparations. The modern intensive farming system is based on the widespread use of high doses of mineral fertilizers, chemical protection methods used to combat weeds, pests and plant diseases. Despite the high economic efficiency of their use, a number of negative consequences arise due to their accumulation in the soil. The soil microflora dies and physiological functions of plants are disrupted. Nitrates and toxins accumulate in agricultural products, negatively affecting human health. The aggravation of the ecological situation and an increase in the number of patients with various diseases make necessary the production of ecologically clean agricultural products. In a number of countries, a tendency towards a decrease in the doses of applied mineral fertilizers is being monitored, and the role of their integrated use for economic and environmental reasons with agrotechnical methods aimed at maintaining natural soil fertility is increasing, including scientifically based crop rotations, measures aimed at increasing the biodiversity of useful soil microflora. One of these techniques is the use of humic preparations. Humic substances perform a number of important ecological functions in the biosphere: accumulative, transport, regulatory, physiological and protective. A distinctive feature of humic substances is their stochastic nature, due to the peculiarities of their formation as a result of the selection of biothermodynamically stable structures. As a consequence, the fundamental properties of humic substances include non-stoichiometric composition, irregular structure, heterogeneity of structural elements, and polydispersity. Therefore, the concept of a molecule is inapplicable for humic substances, and the probable scheme of their structure is presented using a structural cell, the smallest fragment of a molecule that contains all the most important structural units. Despite numerous theoretical studies and confirmed positive results in this area, there are no industrial technologies for the production of humic fertilizers of a sufficient level of development. The overwhelming majority of preparations based on humic acids have an active ingredient concentration of no more than 2–3%. In addition, preparations often have low consumer qualities, the ballast, the impossibility of accurate dosing of trace element, a low concentration of active ingredients due to the lack of specialized industrial equipment and scientifically grounded production technology. In connection with the above, the issue of developing technologies for the production and use of humic preparations is relevant. The authors have developed an innovative technology for the production of humic preparations related to the combined production methods and aimed at increasing the efficiency of the technological process and the quality indicators of the resulting product. It is based on cavitation dispergating of humate containing raw materials with subsequent additional introduction of microelements into the humate solution. The innovative elements of the proposed technology are: preliminary preparation of raw materials, consisting in sifting, hydration and separation of sand and other insoluble inclusions, differentiated introduction of a chemical reagent alkali by means of a first-order neural network, multi-stage purification of the resulting product, an automated system for the dosed introduction of microelements, automation of the main technological production processes. Hydration of raw materials. Peat, worm compost or sapropel is carried out in a hydromechanical unit for preliminary preparation of raw materials. In the process of hydration, the suspension is cleaned of sand and other insoluble inclusions. It is subjected to intensive bubbling under the influence of various hydrodynamic and mechanical influences, thus creating elements of cavitation processes. Under the influence of these processes, a preliminary intensive crushing of peat particles occurs, which ensures the homogeneity of the suspension and the separation of insoluble inclusions. This has a positive effect on the further course of the process of dispersing the suspension in the dismembrator, and also significantly reduces the abrasive wear of the working bodies of the units and assemblies of the technological complex. After cleaning the suspension of peat, worm compost or sapropel from sand and other impurities, it is fed into the reactor, which is a cylindrical container. For the differentiated introduction of alkali, the reactor vessel is equipped with a pH level sensor, a dosing pump and a tank for an alkaline solution. After pumping the water peat suspension into the reactor, a dismembrator connected to the reactor in a loop circuit is switched on, and the process of circulation of the suspension through the reactor dismembrator reactor cycle begins. In order to improve the quality indicators of the obtained fertilizers, it was proposed to differentiate the introduction of alkali into the suspension by using a neural network that uses data on the pH level of the medium, time intervals, doses of alkali introduced and the content of humic and fulvic acids in the feedstock. To develop a neural network, a mathematical model was used, presented on the slide. The use of a system for the differentiated introduction of alkali in the technological process of the production of humates makes it possible to increase the efficiency of the formation of salts of humic acids by 15–20% in comparison with standard methods of introducing alkali. A developed dismembrator was used as the main working body. It belongs to pumping, cavitation, pulsation rotary devices. To increase the efficiency of the process of dispersing the suspension and extracting humic substances, a cavitation nozzle is included in the technological line. Under the action of the supporting pressure, the working suspension to be dispersed and homogenized from the reactor enters the impeller of the central part of the dismembrator and, having received centrifugal acceleration, is directed to the dispersing unit. In the working chamber of the dismembrator there is an active collision and destruction of the crushed particles of the suspension between themselves and the details of the impeller, stator and rotor, as well as their fragmentation between the rotating impeller blades, cylindrical blades of the rotor and stator. Particles falling on the dispersing unit are squeezed out by the impeller under the influence of the pressure created by the centrifugal force, and are abraded between the impeller cutter and the stator, which has a micrometric gap. Since the rotation speed of the impeller is 3000 rpms, there is a gradual shearing, crushing and abrasion by the moving part of each of the impeller blades as the slurry flow moves towards the outlet. After that, the suspension from the outlet of the dismembrator enters a section of the pipeline in front of the cavitation nozzle, where it acquires the properties of a stationary flow. Then, passing through the confuser with the angle of constriction, the suspension enters the central flow channel, at the outlet of which cavitation processes occur in the diffuser with the angle of expansion SS. Cavitation occurs as a result of an increase in the flow rate in accordance with Bernoulli's law. This phenomenon contributes to the additional destruction of solid particles of the suspension and an increase in the yield of humic substances. After passing through the cavitation nozzle, the suspension is returned to the reactor through the pipeline. This cycle is repeated many times until the active formation of salts of humic acid stops according to the method described above. To obtain a ballast-free product, a two-stage purification system is used. From the reactor, the suspension is fed to a battery of hydrocyclones, where insoluble ballast residues with a dimension of 100 microns or more are separated rough cleaning stage, after which the suspension enters the centrifuge, where insoluble ballast residues with a dimension less than 100 microns are separated fine cleaning stage. The results of the studies carried out to determine the quality of the proposed cleaning system using microscopic examination of samples are shown in slide. The data of visual inspection and the results of sieve analysis showed that when using cassette filters, the particle size reached 1000 microns, and the content of the ballast part was 13%, which was associated with the imperfection of the design of the filters used and the irregularity of the geometric dimensions and shapes of the ballast particles. The results obtained do not correspond to modern requirements of agricultural and technological equipment. When cleaning with a hydrocyclone, the maximum particle size of the ballast part did not exceed 100 microns, with a ballast part content of 8%. These indicators are much better than those of samples after cassette filters. However, for the use of the obtained preparations in modern agricultural technologies, their additional purification is required. The use of a centrifuge for the purification of humates made it possible to reduce the proportion of the ballast drastically. At the same time, the results of the studies carried out, including the use of microscopy of samples of humic preparations, made it possible to establish reliably that the use of a two-stage purification system in the production line ensures the highest quality product with a ballast content of up to 1% and a particle size of less than 10 microns, which allows considering the obtained humates ballast-free. Considering the ability of humic substances to bind metal ions, the authors have developed an automated device and software complex for the differentiated enrichment of the obtained humic preparations with microelements. The calculation of the doses of microelements for soil application is based on long-term experimental data of Federal Research Center Nemchanovka on the effect of soil microelements, micronutrient and organic fertilizers on the yield of the main agricultural crops in the central region of Russia. For this, mathematical models were developed for calculating the doses of trace elements boron, copper, manganese, molybdenum, cobalt, zinc in the form of an equation. The above mathematical model is nonlinear in parameters A1, A2, A3. Therefore, when calculating the optimal values of these parameters for this model, the standard least squares method is inapplicable. The optimal estimate of the parameters of the function f(a1), a2, a3, x1, x2, is calculated using gradient methods, in particular, using the coordinate descent method. The mathematical model is tested on an array of real data. An example of the calculation results is shown in slide. Correlation coefficients, RF, ER equals 0.9974. RZF, ZR equals 0.9991. The correlation coefficients between the calculated and initial values of the yield indicators, as well as the values of the doses of the applied micronutrients, are close to 1, which means a high degree of connection between them. This, in turn, indicates that the parameters of the equation are determined in an optimal way. The calculation of doses of microelements for pre-sowing treatment of seeds and foliar feeding of plants is carried out based on recommendations developed on the basis of field experiments of the Geographic Network of Federal State Budgetary Scientific Institutional Russian Research Institute of Agrochemistry. The process of enrichment with microelements is carried out by the dosing method using a software and hardware complex based on programs, Master OPC Universal Modbus Server and Master SCADA. Depending on the concentration of humic acids in the solution, the program calculates the area for which the entire volume of humic preparations in the storage tank of the technological lines can be applied. Depending on the dose of the introduced preparations, the dose of microelements for introduction into the solution is adjusted according to the ratio of the concentration of humic acid salts in 1 liter of the humic preparation to the dose of humic preparations. On the basis of research carried out by scientists of Federal State Budgetary Scientific Institution FNACVIM, a technology for the production of humic and complex preparations from various types of organic raw materials peat, brown coal, isopropyl, vermicompost has been developed. The developed technology allows to increase the efficiency of the extraction process of humic and fulvic acids as a result of a combined effect on raw materials, as well as the differentiated introduction of alkali by means of a first-order neural network. It also makes possible to obtain ballast-free humic preparations, thanks to the use of a multi-stage purification system for the finished product, and to receive complex preparations due to the dose administration of various microelements. For this development, a patent was received for method for the production of organic mineral, complex fertilizers and a technological line for its implementation.